WhiteLion presents Red Dawn's Dragon. I'm not sure how to bring this up without sounding completely and utterly insane. I keep going back and forth in my mind whether to tell this story or not. But in my old age, I feel it's time I told my story. It's time I told the tale of Red Dawn's Dragon. This is former Knight James. Today I woke up thinking about my past, and it's not that I had a bad life. I didn't. I have had sons and daughters and seen them grow up to be respectable young adults who to this day make me very proud. My wife was buried about 3 months ago, and I think about her every day. The one person who got me through every hardship, every misery that plagued my life. She got me through it. While I was reminiscing about her, I am reminded of the fact that she is the only one I ever told about a horrid experience I had that changed me forever. It only took one night for a young lad to become a man with no fear. And though every man should live fearless, it's not always the way to go about things, especially if you accept that you are already dead, which makes you careless with your life, taking risks that might end it all. My old age now, I care less about what people think, and I tell you today, you will read and hear of the realities that elude us. Many go their whole lives without ever having an incident or event they can't explain, nor would they. If something abnormal happens, we tend to live as if it never took place, because it doesn't fit in our perception of what we call reality. And the basis for that is an outright lie that I cannot continue to live with or associate its ways with mine any longer. For you see, life is more than meets the eye, as it is as spiritual just as much as it is physical. But why do I say this? Well, all it takes is one moment in time to change you from being a believer to knowing it is so. Many years ago, when I was but a rookie knight, a peasant barged into the king's throne room, all hysterical and rambling on about devils and flying demons that shoot fire and fury. "Sire, sire, death and Hades have befallen us. The devil is on a rampage with Red." "Silence! You dare speak to the king in this manner? Take him away." "Cancel that order. I am not a tyrant, remember. Please step forth and plead your case, for you have my ear." "Oh, thank you, good king. Mercy." "The king might have patience with improper routine, but I don't. How dare you barge in like this with no introduction or appointment, I might add?" Well, if you stop pestering him, maybe we can hear why a man with rational thought, who knows proper procedures, rushed in here frantically, or can't you tell he's shaken? When a man's nerves are shaken, do you expect a rational mind? You are rational, yes? Oh, great king, I am rational, but something terrible has happened. Huh. I appreciate your words, but remember that the true king is the Alpha and Omega. I am but a man with power, is all, but now, tell me of this devil and what has he done? The peasant man, realizing the absurdity of what he is about to say, mutes himself for a moment. As he closes his eyes and trembles with fear, not just from the traumatic thing he had witnessed, but now more than likely faces imprisonment, even though he has truth on his side. The king sees that this man is mentally distressed and lightens the mood. Ah, where are my manners? Peasant man, tell us your name. Henry, sire. Hmm. Would you like water or bread? I don't have wine, for I am not a fan of alcohol, but maybe you should take some time to gather your thoughts and return once you are sane. King Fires, please believe in me when I tell you this. The town farthest from your castle, near the gray mountainous region, has all been wiped out, burned to the ground. Upon saying this, everyone gasped and grew silent as all eyes turned to the king, for they were eager to see how this played out as more knowledge was learned from this tragedy. The king stared at Henry for a second and ordered the room to be temporarily closed off. With a more serious demeanor, he stands up from his throne and began speaking. You realize the severity of what you are saying, yes? Yes, I do, but. Well, what did you see? Who or what has burnt down the town of Asheville, is it? Correct, sire. Ironic. Well, tell us, who did it? Was it the army from the south? Perhaps nomads that came down from the mountains and pillaged everything. We should have dealt with them when we had the chance. They have done this too many times now, and your mercy on these people has been more than fair. Please listen to me. Please. It wasn't destroyed by any hand, but. But what? What are you saying? I I think it was done by a flying monster. At this point, they all glared at the man, thinking he was going to start laughing or show signs that he was indeed a lunatic, out for some laughs with no regards for their own life. The king looked straight ahead and with a grin. Henry, you do know the penalty for lying about such a thing would be death. You have to believe me, king. I tell you the truth. You said it yourself. Why would a rational person storm into your presence and speak nonsense? I thought. I know this sounds far-fetched because I have trouble believing it myself, but I witnessed it.
I witnessed Asheville's destruction with my own two eyes.
That's enough out of you. Let me take this fool away.
You don't believe me? Look for yourself. If I am a liar, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong first before you hang me.
That's enough, boy. Silence yourself.
The king remained silent. He looked into the frightened man's eyes for any signs of deception. The life of a commoner was in his hands, and though it's probable he's lying, it's also possible that he could very well be telling the truth. And if he kills a man who speaks truth, then that is blood on his hands that will ascend up to the heavens, which he had no desire to fulfill.
King Fires, you are the king of truth, righteousness, and honesty, who does right by the Lord of hosts. Please believe in me. Send your knights out to investigate before you put me away forever.
After a long pause, the room erupted with voices.
You listen
Men
here,
shouting
you
for this
listen.
peasant to be hung, and others
Presiding
bickering over a more secure throne room to keep people like Henry out until the king spoke. Tell me what you saw. The room grew silent again.
With all due respect, my lord, don't entertain such a foolery.
The king's eyes glared suddenly at his adviser, and with a stern voice, "Quiet, Adam. Know your place." The king's adviser stepped down and prepared to take notes as this conversation would continue. "I want this room silent. The town in my care has possibly been attacked and plundered, and regardless of if this man is telling the truth or not, we must take every word into consideration. What if it was attacked? What if those same people are on their way to attack the next town? Anyone who survives and tries to warn us of the impending danger is brushed aside until the enemy is at the gates. Then what? For all you know, they could be using fear tactics, dressing up as ghouls and goblins, or creating wooden statues on wheels, or did you forget the Battle of Troy with the Trojan horse? Men are capable of such things, are they not? This man thinks he saw a monster. Maybe he has, maybe he hasn't. But we will never know if we hang him. Now, Henry, I want you to calmly and slowly tell me of this monster."
Well, it all started yesterday at around dusk, when some others and myself noticed no wildlife around, not even a creeping thing. The air felt heavy as if a weight had been placed over the land, and I became somewhat uneasy. I just didn't feel safe. I went home and thought maybe I needed a nap, but I ended up slumbering into the night, so when I awoke, I felt off. I felt like something was watching me. And I'm usually not a paranoid person, no different than any other. It was so quiet and not a noise could be heard, so I decided to take a walk. There wasn't a soul around, so I just kept walking with my head down to the ground, just thinking, and as I got further and further away from town, just on the outskirts of Asheville, I decided I went far enough, and as I turned my head, I see it. I see it upon a hill with glowing yellow eyes. I was so terrified that I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare right back, as it was a monstrous sized figure with a wingspan that stretched over the hill, and a body that resembled that of a snake with limbs. A most imposing figure that I saw take flight and burn the town to nothing.
Again, the room went silent, and as they stood there, it started to dawn on some that perhaps this was real. And if it is, how do they go about handling such a bizarre creature? Adam, the king's advisor, and many others still weren't convinced that what he saw was a flying monster, but a figment of his imagination, for it had to be. But even so, the king still had to take the man's words seriously, for it meant war with somebody, whoever that could be. If what you say is true, then you should have no issue staying here until we can prove your words have weight to them. I am going to give you the benefit of the doubt, though I'm sure you didn't see a beast with wings. I am, however, certain an attack did happen, which I will look into immediately. As the King of Kings lives, I will stay here until I am reconciled. Then it is settled. We will investigate your claim, and if there is any truth to it, I will personally see that you are heavily rewarded. But if you are lying, my poor frightened friend, my sword will find your neck. Agreed? Agreed. And thank you, my lord. Thank you, sire. Later on that day, the king had requested an earl to lead the investigation regarding Asheville and to march with 100 plus knights to the outermost furthest town that had been supposedly vaporized by a flying lizard with glowing eyes. Along the way, many were questioned about any suspicious or abnormal individuals or strangers to the region recently. I was under the Earl's command at the time, just a young knight doing his duty, and I tell you now that not one of us was asking about an abnormal creature, but men, women, the threat of invaders under a banner with no name. At first, we had no luck getting information from the locals, as they had no idea what we were talking about, until we started getting nearer to Asheville. That's when we began learning that an attack may very well have happened. This is when things got confusing for us, because people weren't making any sense, as some kept going on about red, yellow, and blue lights, and others would say that night turned to day for a couple of seconds, and others would not speak of what they saw or heard, but you knew they saw something. Despite our findings, we were convinced that a small army of raiders of a sort were responsible for whatever happened to this town, and the only thing left to do was venture to it and confirm its destruction. Little did we know just how bad its demise truly was, as we were about to encounter a horror never seen before. When we finally arrived, we stood upon a hilltop overlooking the town, and to our shock, it wasn't just burnt down. It was completely vaporized, just as the man said. What was a lush, green area with crops and a river was turned to sand all around. I had been there many times, and I did not recognize anything. And if that wasn't bad enough, just wait until I tell you what was discovered in great detail. When we marched downhill to get to the center of where we could still see some structures, we realized what was left of these huts and tree logs were turned to minerals. In some areas around the perimeter, we kept finding glass, which we concluded was sand at one point. The most disturbing thing we found were that some individuals were unrecognizable, where one person was completely blackened and turned into a hard rock and leather. But not only that, they were fused into the ground. There was no flesh and bone, just earth and rock. Another was found in the ruins who became one with it, as in mixed in with brick and stone. How that happens was incomprehensible to us all. We could see that an explosion had taken out the town, and the trees that were knocked over made it obvious. But the strangest mystery we couldn't figure out was the explosion itself, and the effects of it which boggled the minds. I can remember just standing there. Yes, I can picture myself staring into the nothingness. What was once a green and lively town was nothing but a desert now. And no matter where we searched, no matter where we looked, there were no answers to be found. More questions to be asked, and no enemy to point out. While we were standing there scratching our heads, the Earl had called me over for a quick conversation I thought would ended up being a lesson in knighthood investigations. I don't understand. Understand what, sir? Any of this. Nothing that I've investigated here makes any sense. What's to investigate? It's obviously been destroyed by somebody with very odd tactics. May I ask, what tactics do you think went on here? Well, they burnt everything to the ground, sir. How? My lord, I want you to tell me how they burnt down this town. In what manner did they do this? With torches and fiery arrows, I imagine, or perhaps hot pots of oil? Those are odd tactics. Well,
They do it in a way I really can't explain, which is why I deem it odd tactics. Because we know for certain they used fire in some form or another. Perhaps a catapult with fireballs? I don't know for sure. I was an ignorant mind then. I just assumed that if I used rational reasoning, I could resolve the mystery of that tragedy there. But as the Earl sighed and turned his head, I knew I was about to learn a lesson in knighthood. Knight James, I want you to listen, and I want you to listen well. If you're going to be under my command, I need you to do one thing for me, and that is to have a clear and open mind. When the king informed me of this disaster, I, like you, assumed that perhaps a rival army down south had invaded us, and all I was prepared to do was confirm and report back what that man claimed happened or didn't happen, but I never considered his words to be literal. But somewhere in his rant, I thought maybe there was some truth to it. What are you getting at, my lord? I've been in many skirmishes, many battles. I've seen villages burned to the ground by men with torches, fire arrows that rain from the sky. I have dealt with the aftermath of such attacks, dealing with the devastation of homes, broken families, and these blood-stained hands of mine, striking down foes with the sword, and whether it's right or wrong, I don't feel any glory from killing. My lord, my apologies for being outspoken, and shall not overstep my bounds again. You misunderstand me, my young friend. I wasn't looking to correct you, though it's needed. But my intention here is to mold you into a true knight, who doesn't rely on his own echo chamber of delusions. Your claims must hold weight to them, yes? Does what you say match the reality that we can see and touch and, most importantly, prove? Say I wasn't here and you were in my place to bring justice to our kingdom. You would have concluded an army of a sort had attacked this town and had the king searching for a ghost that was never there. Now, I thought it was strange for him to say that, as I looked at him with such confusion. And I knew he was about to make a point which I would carry with me many years after that. We all assume too much with little to no evidence or proof, yet we somehow form an opinion or conclusion on virtually nothing. My lord, I don't quite understand what you are trying to tell me, but I am eager to learn. Indeed. Walk with me, James. Now, if you're going to be an earl one day, you must have your wits about you. You cannot allow ignorance to overtake you. Understand? Okay. Now I want you to Now I want to ask you, if men attacked this village, then you tell me how. First of all, there are no signs of an attack, though it's obvious this place was leveled. Look at the bodies. Search the remains for any signs of puncture wounds, sword slashes. There are no enemy corpses anywhere. There should be a few, being that this town had somewhat of a good defense. There are no flags planted into the ground or any footprints of any army leading into the town. There were no signs of a fight or struggle. Plus, the vegetation has all been disintegrated completely, turned to sand. Fire arrows, fire rocks, or anything of the sort does not do this to the ground. And if you know anything about fire, you'd know fire weapons of a sort do not get hot enough to melt the ground. And it's one thing if it's a small patch of dirt that maybe was exposed to high temperatures from a furnace in place, smelting iron. But look around. This entire area has been in an inferno. Look at this god here, in full armor, yet it melted off his body like butter. Do you know at what temperature iron melts? That would be 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit, or 1,538 degrees Celsius. What fire weapon reaches such a temperature? And better yet, who could wield such a thing? Trees, buildings, remains do not turn to mineral in this manner. The way things are shown here, we can only conclude a massive explosion happened in an instant, just one, that I couldn't recall any empire or kingdom having, is solely responsible for this town's demise. There are no tracks, no motive, no banners, no arrows. It's as if fire rained down from the heavens and consumed this place. Like Sodom and Gomorrah? Yes, my confused knight. Like Sodom and Gomorrah. We were ordered to tend to the other towns while the Earl rode back to inform the king of Asheville's demise. I wasn't thrilled about staying out there too long, for we didn't know. We didn't know what kind of foe we faced, or even if it was anything at all. For all we knew, an accident may have happened there due to witchcraft, or maybe the Lord did rain fire upon that town for their sin. But all we could do was speculate or guess, and all we could think about was the way in which that town was destroyed. We kept asking ourselves, what kind of weapon could do this in one go? And if we encountered such an enemy, how would we defend ourselves? So we were paranoid and on our toes the rest of the evening. This is where it gets hard for me to talk about because many knights were slain by something we never fathomed existed. As the Earl drew near to the king, we patrolled all around the outskirts of some of the towns there, but on this night we found it very eerie, or felt something was off. If I wasn't such an ignorant young man at the time, I would have considered Henry's story regarding the warning signs. The air felt heavy, and the wind hostile. My senses tingled and my hairs stood up. The moon haunted me with its gaze as I watched it settled over the hills, giving way to utter and complete darkness that birthed fear all around. For every turn, every corner, and every path lead to a potential ambush. Your nerves are rattled if you face an enemy with swords and shields, but not knowing the threat made it even worse. I kept hearing these whoosh sounds above me, thinking it was bursts of air or wind overhead. The knights in the area would also hear what sounded like something flying above us, but we could not see anything, so we ignored it. After an hour of roaming around, my eyes began to adjust, and at some point in my patrol, I stopped in my tracks upon a hilltop in the blackest of night. My guard drops and my eyes open wide as I see something off in the distance that shook me to my foundation. I froze up, not knowing what to do. Should I move? Should I run? I knew I had to man up, but the fear overtook me. It made me mute. It made me still, but I knew I had to act. But what made things worse is that I could see a group of night brothers walking straight into the shadow with red ruby eyes. I finally snapped myself out of it to yell as loud as I could with all my might, but they couldn't see me or make out what I was saying, and they just kept marching forward until it was too late. The men halted in place as their hearts dropped from fear. Their eyes looked into the thick darkness, seeing a massive figure just standing there, motionless. Their eyes deceived them not, but before they could act, the eyes of death glowed with evil intent. Growing brighter, blood-red light began to shine through the shadows of the surrounding area. When a pinnacle was reached, all I could see was a burst of intense, blinding light that became brighter than the sun itself, turning night to day for a split second, just as they said. A great light went up with the sound of many thunders, and just like that, a dozen knights were vaporized in an instant from this red fury of fire. My ears rung from the deafening noise and shock wave that followed. I had no idea what had just happened, but I knew. I knew right then and there, whatever this creature was, it was responsible for Asheville's demise. I knew exactly how it was destroyed as I just witnessed it with my own two eyes. I turned around to look and saw it in great detail, as it was noticeable after that energy release, for it glowed with such radiancy. I could see it clearly, with a red body, bluish tint and yellow claws, teeth, and eyes. It was an enormous creature that we had no knowledge of. No history or even heard of something like this before, but we all come to learn that what we were seeing was what can only be described as a dragon. I stood on the hill alone for a minute, watching it as it took flight and disappeared into the abyss of the sky. Shortly after, some other knights caught up with me.
Say, are you all right?
We saw everything from a distance. What was that creature just now? I don't know, but we must find and kill it before it hurts anyone else. Assemble the men and prepare to fight to the death. Bring me a messenger, for I must inform the king of this incident. They looked at me like I had lost it. But I just saw my friends die in an instant. I was angered that fear had stunned me so. I became an irrational mind. They persuaded me that a better plan would be to regroup with the rest of the knights and travel back to the castle to inform the earl and king of this incident. But just as we were about to go, we saw another glow in the distance, as well as the sounds of men and women crying out for help. So our training kicked in and we sprinted to them. This dragon had flew to another area. Not a town, but a small village with some of our knights there, and spewed this yellow gas that was similar to how fire works, but it raised the temperature of the area tremendously. People suffocated or melted right in front of us, which was the most horrifying and bizarre thing I had ever seen up to that point. I asked myself how we would even go about attacking such a monster that seems to attack in more ways than one. Either you are vaporized in an intense light or engulfed in yellow fires. And if we leave now, more people were going to be killed. And as knights, we could not allow that to happen, so we charged in, not really caring for our own safety. But as soon as we stood toe to toe, eye to eye, against it, I couldn't convince myself that this was real. That this could not be happening. You could see its body was covered in armored plates. You could feel the heat pulsing off it. The growl it made was petrifying. I heard a voice shout, "It's charging up again!" When I heard that, I snapped out of my trance yet again, and was the first one to attack. Charged at it and plunged my sword into its chest. When I look back at what I did, it boggles my mind that I had the guts to do any of this. But it was my duty to protect the people, my friends and family, from any threat, no matter what it was, and a dragon was no exception. I'm not sure how I survived. Only God knows. But when I plunged my sword into its plate, all I managed to do was enrage it. All I remember was waking up to my ears ringing and seeing lights or flashes. But later on, years later, those men who had survived said it had raised its arm and swung at me with fierce strength, sending me flying through the air and into the tree line, which they thought I had perished, especially from such a violent attack. But anyhow, so when I awoke, some of the townspeople were patching me up as best they could, and as soon as I remembered what I was doing, I shot up and I looked around. I could barely hear or see, but I was ready to take another dig at this devil that threatened our way of life. So I asked the survivors where my men and this dragon went to, and they told me that
when I was knocked unconscious, that the knights that were surrounding this dragon all attacked at once and took the fight over the hilltop just beyond the river. I could see the bodies of my knight brothers torn apart, melted into oblivion or turned to ash. I don't know what a normal person's reaction to these things would be, but at this point I knew it was perhaps a losing battle, and my life was over, for I had to perish with my brothers in arms as they did for me. I can't really explain how I survived, but I did. We attacked this dragon for hours, not letting up because if we did, then it would recover its powers and destroy us. So every time we saw this serpent charging up with a red glow, we all jumped it, sacrificing our bodies to the intense heat, getting third-degree burns, scorched limbs, and blisters everywhere. We tried to do everything to best this monster, whether it was shooting oil-soaked arrows into its mouth, which would cause it to implode from within, and yes, I do mean implode, to smashing its limbs, claws, anything to lighten its offenses. It's strange now, when I think about it, but we had little to no communication at all. We just knew what we had to do as if we were one. We just couldn't stop what we were doing to plan anything else. We just kept it simple. Don't allow it to use its main attack, so we continually targeted its head with arrows, spears, and nets, but also put a stop to its flying capabilities by throwing rope after ropes upon it as well as slashing at its wings without rest. It took some time to destroy the wings, as we had other bodily threats to worry about, such as its claws, its jaws, and its tail. Every time it tried to fly away, there were certain knights that took it upon themselves to tie boulders to their bodies and attach as much rope as possible to wherever they could, so when it attempted to take flight, they would bring it back down and attack, and they brought it down many times. I saw a fair amount of knights drop to their deaths from doing this, but on the last try it flew high into the night sky and crashed down into the gray mountains, where we continued to pursue it. Whatever knights were left charged up into the mountains, and by the looks of it, this might end up being our last stand, which is what we were prepared for, to give our lives for honor, for country, for each other. Fire arrows and spears were ready to be utilized, and I had hoped this beast with scales would be at least wounded, or show signs of letting up, but it showed none whatsoever. When we finally found it on the side of a mountain ridge, we could see it left a massive skid that stretched from the cliffs to the ground, which it was covered in rubble. So we took advantage and got into formation and attacked with all that we had. But all of a sudden it opened its mouth and let out a fire so hot it turned anything it hit to nothingness. It left nothing, not even ashes, whether it was rock or flesh. It was gone. That was another eye-opener to this creature's power. More knights vaporized before my very eyes into non-existence, and I was next. One after another, we fell to this devil with no weakness until at one point there was but a dozen of us left. We didn't care for our lives at this point, for we accepted death. One brave knight waved his sword, and with that, 5 more were engulfed in its yellow flames, perishing into their eternal slumbers. The 6 remaining knights stood behind me, awaiting my final command to attack. We were tired, bloodied. I was ready to lead the last charge until something told me to pray. I wasn't a man that went to church every day or spent countless hours reading scripture, but a divine feeling came over me, for in that moment I saw my life before it happened, my wife before I met her, my kids before they were born, my will to live before I knew it, as I always sought out death. A name came to mind. I said one name that gave me hope, that I knew I could count on when it came down to it. I merely uttered the words, Jesus Christ, King of Kings, save us this night. Now this may sound far-fetched, but all of a sudden a light from within engulfed my being, and I was no longer in control of my actions, as my body, without my permission, kneeled down. I saw this spiritual armor appear upon me that was visible but could see right through it. And with a spiritual sword within the iron one I wielded. I turned my sword over to make the cross, planted it into the ground, and began praying. I don't know what I was saying, nor do I remember, but the remaining knights who were with me from start to finish told me I was speaking a language they had never heard before, and whatever I was saying had power in the words, which ultimately stopped this devil in its tracks. Winds upon winds rushed through the air. I felt the earth shake below me, and I could see clearly what my foe was. As all this knowledge and understanding became apparent to me, which I don't have anymore, but in that moment, I knew it was nothing natural and didn't belong here. This dragon from hell was lifted into the air, and just as it destroyed the town of Asheville, it collapsed from within, then exploded outwards with such force it knocked every tree down, blew off every mountain top, and pushed all the clouds away, clearing the sky. Somehow I, along with my loyal knight brothers, were unaffected by the explosion. As I knew we were shielded from it all, as I was watching this, I saw its spirit, for it was not dead, and hovered there as a black mass, but its body gone. The air lifted, the weight of darkness was no longer there, and when I finally got control of my body again to stand, it dissipated, and everything returned to normal, for it was done. There was only 7 of us left standing in the early hours of the morning, with our newly restored faith in a higher power. I looked up to the heavens like I never had before, and knew that no matter what happened, no matter the evil that befall us, that good would always win at the end of the day. For I knew the Creator of all things was watching over us. You'd think we would have been eager to head back, but we stayed in place for hours, trying to wrap our heads around what had just happened, for it was much to grasp. Eventually, we were found as people followed the trail of destruction leading into the mountains. They knew something terrible had happened, but were getting no answers from us, as we were collapsed within ourselves. We had shut down and just wanted to be alone for a while. We were brought back to the king's castle along with all the bodies of the fallen knights, or what was left of them. It was like a dream that happened, but it wasn't. These things all took place in real life, yet we couldn't accept it all. The dragon, the devastation, the prayer of prayers where God saved the day. Who do you tell? How do you explain it? Should you? Well, like Henry, I went with the truth. The Earl was the first one to greet me and informed me that the king required my presence and an explanation for the death of so many knights. They were aware that we achieved victory as we were the last ones standing, but couldn't figure out against who, for there were no enemy bodies to compare, for it would have seemed we were fighting against complete phantoms. I had a long conversation with the king that day, telling him everything that had transpired from the investigation of Asheville to the prayer that destroyed this dragon where it stood. The others confirmed my story as they were right. They were right there and alongside me the whole way. We told of many brave knights who fought and perished trying to slay this demon from the underworld, and we did, but not in the way they had thought. When the Earl and the King had heard enough, they ordered the throne room closed off and called us all in, including Henry, who was redeemed and one that could be trusted as his words were proven true. The king called Henry forward, and as a man of his word, he rewarded Henry heavily with wealth, a mansion, lifelong servants, maids, a farm, soldiers to guard him for life, and knighted Sir Henry. The man was overjoyed with emotion and teary-eyed, and gave praise to the Lord above. We were rewarded in a similar way: wealth, land, servants, and elevated status. But once that was all done, he had us lined up side to side and told us that there was only one last request that he would like us to carry out, and that was to keep what happened in Asheville a secret and never to mention it ever again to anyone, not even our own families. This request never sat right with me, but I understood where the king was coming from, for this is what he told us, man to man. I know what you all are wondering. Why keep this to ourselves? Why not tell the truth? I keep asking myself that as well. Why would we keep this out of the public knowledge? I want you all to understand that people do not handle these things well. They just don't. Perhaps I am wrong for asking this of you, and the Lord will deal with me. But right now, I feel it's the right thing to do. I don't want people to panic. I don't want people to call us a liar either, as there is no real way of proving any of this, especially without a body to showcase. No dead dragon equals no proof, which equals far-fetched in the minds of the people. I don't need them losing faith in me over this whole ordeal, for I need them to trust me as I trusted Henry. I will not tell people a lie, but I will inform them at some point that what happened last night will not be disclosed, and they will understand. I deal with emperors, kings, rulers, and I have their respect. But if this story ever got out, they would halt all trading with us and label us a mockery of a kingdom. People are unbelieving, even though we are rooted in Christ. We still doubt, we still sin, and we are always looking up to repent. Maybe one day we will tell of your tale here, for it is now a part of our history. And even now I have scholars and priests writing everything down in a scroll and secretly adding it to our nation's history. Whether people choose to believe it or not is on them, for they will just have to have faith.